First and foremost, a sincere and special welcome and thank you to everyone joining us on today's episode of the Lighthouse Factory podcast. I'm your host, Brian Benavides, and today's guest is an artist that works on what I think are these amazing murals in addition to printmaking, design, and commercial art. Not only has he been able to make his art a career, but he has also been able to make sure that he gives back with the power of his art. Today, I'm pleased to have with us the talented John Ortiz. John, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, John. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And John, I know that there is a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
And though Martin couldn't be with us today, couldn't join us today, being someone who sincerely appreciates your artistry, I made sure that we sat down and talked about some of his questions for you. But I want to start with some basics.
Sure.
I know that you're not only a full-time artist at Trader Joe's on top of your freelance work, but you also have relationships with two great nonprofit organizations, Words, Beats, and Life, which I believe is based in Washington, D.C., as well as Pyramid Atlantic Art Center, which is in the Hyattsville Arts District down in PG, both which have a powerful mission and intentions to help the surrounding cities with creativity, which frankly I think is amazing. And as I was researching you, I ran into them and learned about them. So I wanna start with you telling me a little bit about how you got started at Trader Joe's, how you started that career, but I do want to make sure we touch on those different things.
Sure. To be honest, I think with Trader Joe's, it was something kind of like unexpected. I responded to a call as far as like looking for an in-house artist at one of their locations. It was actually in Arlington, Virginia. I expected like to go in and be interviewed, standard questions and stuff like that, submitting a resume, but I actually brought in work and was asked as far as like creating stuff that was based around the store, which was interesting because it was like a different take from like your regular interview, I would say, in-person interview. So I had left. I came back, submitted some hand-drawn work after looking at like the theme of the store and how all the signs look. And so I kind of gave it my interpretation and then I just handed those over.
Nice.
And then when I had gone in for a follow-up interview, my interview was, there weren't any questions and it was interesting because I'll never forget it. They gave me, they called it the stress test. And so basically, they gave me a 6-foot chalkboard. They gave me an 8x10 piece of paper and a 4x6 piece of paper. It was basically like sign templates. And so they gave me 3 products and they said, I would like the coconut water on the chalkboard. I would like the pineapple salsa on the 8x10 sheet. And I would like the, I forget what was the last one, but it was something small, like a small little item. And they gave that to me and they said, you have 1 hour. And so basically they gave me all the materials I needed, but right then and there it was like time management. I kind of muted them and I kind of like thought about what is priority and what I needed to focus on. And so, within an hour I was able to knock them all out. And I felt good about it. And it was cool because they offered me the position, and that was about 6 years ago.
So was that something they saw on the spot and said, okay, we love your product, and they offered you the position, or did it take a little bit of time?
It took a little bit of time. I think it was kind of like, because there were other artists coming in doing the same thing, there were people that came in with their sketches, they followed up and they gave them this test. And so I was hired with another artist who still works for the company as well. And so we kind of worked side by side. But I also, to this day, work with the person who hired me, who has kind of like taught me a lot as far as things to be mindful in when it comes to like designing for retail space and stuff like that. So I was offered the job, and they were really, they're a really good company as far as like being flexible and helpful in many ways. So, and I'm still learning, it's just one of those things that like I'm always constantly learning little things about like the store and like what it is as far as like catering to certain neighborhoods as far as like when it comes to opening up another store in another location.
Well, I'm curious because this might sound odd to some people, but I always pay attention to the signs when I go into Trader Joe's. And frankly, especially during this time right now where everyone's kind of limited in the space, so you can actually pay a little bit more attention. But I pay attention, and my mother-in-law loves Trader Joe's, so she has me like go there pretty often. But once I go in there, I check it out, and I'm always curious because I've seen you've done this for quite some time. Do you like do an entire region, or do you do a handful of stores? Because I'm always curious if that's Is that John's work?
It's funny because each location has their own set of in-house artists. So every single store has their own set of artists, and they all work for the most part like in store. Sometimes there's like offsite projects. So I started in Arlington, in Clarendon, and then from there I went to the U Street store, and it was cool because I got to contribute as far as like the opening and learn a lot of things when it came to that. And then from the U Street store, I went to the Capitol Hill location right there off of Pennsylvania. Same thing, was given like different tasks and opportunities as far as like creating some large scale work and be able to like install it there. And then now I'm at the Glover Park location, which is off of Wisconsin Avenue, and again got to create some fun stuff in that store too.
So is it like a 9 to 5 type gig, or is it a few hours contract? How's that work?
I think to be honest, like it's for when I first started, they were really flexible because I was going to school during the day and then I was coming in and working at night.
Yeah.
But now it's been pretty stable as far as coming in with a specific set of hours Monday through Friday, which I'm grateful for, because I know sometimes like hours can fluctuate.
That made me think for a second. I know that there are some people that feel that it's necessary for an artist to go to school, to go get a good degree before they venture out and explore a career, or in order to be able to get a career in art. Do you find that to be true? Did you study art?
Sure.
What's that story for you? How'd that go about?
Yeah, so I think it took me a little while as far as like really like kind of like buckling down and taking courses, going to school full time. I kind of started off, I went to Montgomery College for a little bit, and initially it was graphic design that I was focused in, but then I kind of gravitated towards studio art. And so I was working with a variety of mediums, from enameling to sculpture to different types of drawings and stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Maryland, I really learned and had an appreciation for printmaking, specifically screen printing. But before I went to Maryland, I actually, someone had reached out and had taken me to Pyramid Atlantic Art Center at the time when they were located in Silver Spring. So it's really interesting because at the end, it kind of comes full circle. So someone introduced me to screen printing at Pyramid Atlantic Art Center in Silver Spring. And then I met someone else who was like well versed in that and really showed me a lot of things. And so when I went to Maryland, I was like, that's what I want to study. As far as like, if we need a degree, like, as far as being artists, it's one of those things that, like, going to school, I'll be honest, some people had said, oh, you should study architecture, you should become a dentist, you should become a lawyer, this and that. But for me, I think like it's nice. I have applied and gone to jobs where they do require, or they do ask for your like bachelor's and fine arts and stuff like that. So, I think having that piece of paper,
for sure, I think that would be helpful for those type of jobs.
Yeah, but I'm not going to say that that's like end all, like if you don't graduate or if you haven't gone to school, because I know plenty of people who have not even, they've only taken a couple of classes and are doing perfectly fine.
Well, since you went to school, I'm curious to hear what your biggest takeaways were from an institutional educational approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
Look, let's put it this way. I think that you can find education through mentorship or learning from others, or some kind of self-study outside of the traditional institution. But what did you find that you learned from that type of education system? And does it make sense for others? Look, what do you think?
I think one, going and kind of taking classes with different instructors is really key and helpful, because there are so many people that I met that kind of guided me and encouraged me in different ways. And I'll say, like, Montgomery College has a really good art program, in my opinion, based on like my experience with like this specific professors. And then when I went to Maryland, the same thing, because I had more of a focus in printmaking, and I had instructors, and I still keep in touch with them to this day, and I still see them at different events and stuff. But they encourage you, they push you out of your comfort zone. So it's like one of those things where you're kind of experimenting and really kind of thinking about like a different approach when it comes to different work. And also being there, I mean, you kind of have these like prerequisites that you have to take, like art history and all different types of classes. I mean, I grew an appreciation for art history, but it took me a little while, but man, like I love it. But it's like being there on campus, you meet people, there's like your peers, you kind of feed off of that energy. And, there's been times where I was on campus and I would stay in the printmaking studio till like 2-3 in the morning, either by myself or with another friend. It's just one of those things that I think it's an experience, but I don't think it's a necessity, complete, like, I think everyone creates their own path in a certain way. But, I think like I really appreciate like the time that I spent at Montgomery College in Maryland.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, talking about exposure and influence from those different teachers and the people that you surround yourself with, I'm thinking about how, let's say, for example, do you have a favorite medium now that has changed from when you first said, hey, I really want to take an artistic route? Is it the same thing that it is today as it was 10 years ago, or has it evolved over time?
I think I want to say it's evolved because through, say, like a 10-year time period, you kind of like discover these techniques that you weren't aware of. And you kind of combine them and come up with like different styles. And so for me, I think, going into like MC or Maryland, one of my passions, for example, as far as getting into art, is graffiti. And I learned how to take those elements and put them into a fine arts aspect. So, and that was encouraged from one of my professors who said, listen, if you want to, you're screen printing. And that's probably the medium that I was like really interested in as far as like, or field of printmaking was screen printing.
Yeah.
But I also did other things like lithography and intaglio, which is really interesting. But going back to my professor, he kind of like told me, hey, you can combine like different mediums and continue to screen print if you want. So I would experiment with spray paint. So basically creating these like mixed medium pieces. And I mean, I would even combine bleach onto the paper and screen print on top of that. So the combination, you kind of get these like different interesting reactions. I would sometimes run black paper through a wide format printer. And then from there, there's like a design that was printed on it. I would add bleach, and then I would also print on top of that, screen print on top of that. And it's just kind of trial and error. Sometimes you don't get what you want, but sometimes you don't even know what you want. You're just like, trying things. And then sometimes you just discover stuff that's really interesting and you might be fascinated with. So,
well, I'm super intrigued right now and I kind of want to see something. So don't forget to show me later where I can find this.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me tell you what I'm thinking right now, because I think that most artists are kind of hesitant to dive into an artistic career because of what they think might be, let's say, financial restraints or a fear to take opportunities that may not offer what, let's say, is a traditional, good, stable income. What drove you to be an artist, and what kind of keeps you focused and motivated?
Well, I would say, to be honest, I think like I was into art when I was young. My dad would always draw, and I was always like interested in his characters, and I would get into like comic books and comic book cards and stuff like that. And so I would always draw, and I think like once I hit like 13, 14, and I started discovering other things and got into like graffiti and stuff like that, it kind of just like opened up, and you kind of like think about your options and what you can do. And for me, I really loved art. I mean, I do to this day. I mean, it's like everything is like visual to me, and that's how I, sometimes interpret things around me, just like strictly by visual. But it could be like text, it could be color schemes, it could be shapes, all types of stuff. As far as like a career, I think, again, like I can remember sometimes people would say like, you should consider maybe like being an architect or being a lawyer, being a doctor. And I'm not knocking any of those fields because, you know, that's also like, I respect that. And like people are really passionate with those positions, but I really just wanted to stick through. And, you know, there was a time where you kind of like think like, okay, what am I going to do? Like how do you kind of create a name for yourself? I think when I was in school, I was more focused in refining and practicing and like these skills. And, you know, I even had the opportunity to go to like a conference in Portland, Oregon, and meet other printmakers and like, you know, meeting people that were like making a name for themselves through like something like this was like encouraging and really interesting. And it's motivating because you want to work more, you want to create work. Yeah. But yeah, you have to ask yourself that question. Like if you're creating something, what are you creating it for? Obviously, like you're passionate, you're trying to make art that, you know, you appreciate, but also maybe someone else might appreciate. But I think it's something that is more for yourself than anything. And I think like after, like all that will follow up. And so I think for me, you know, I think to be transparent, it's like one of those things you're curious about, and it just like falls into place. And when I mentioned Pyramid Atlantic coming full circle, it was just, you know, I was working at Trader Joe's. You know, I got jumping to Words, Beats, and Life. I was interviewed there. I started interning for that nonprofit organization. Yeah. You know, I'm still working with them. And then like a little bit further down the line, I found out that Pyramid Atlantic had moved to Hyattsville Arts District. And, you know, it was a brand new building. They were looking for artists that could, you know, occupy the studios there. I applied. I think it was just one of those things like you can definitely like, it can be stressful. It's like, you know, you're trying to create and constantly push that stuff out. But I think it's one of those things that you just don't want to drive yourself crazy. Like, you know, it's just, it'll come. I think it's just a matter of like working hard for it. Yeah. And you know, there's been times where I've been burnt out and like, you know, creating, and yeah, you'll ask these questions like, oh, what am I doing? Like, why am I creating this stuff? Who is it for? You know, what audience? And it's just, it's up and down sometimes, but I think like you meet so many good people and like there's so many doors that open. It's just like it comes. You just build that path for yourself.
Yeah, and I think TC is a really interesting area. I think there's a lot of amazing people out there, an amazing network where you find artists that do a variety of types of mediums, and I feel like it's countless. There's so many. And the main thing, and one of the reasons why I thought about raising my kids in this area was because I wanted them to have exposure to the diversity and creativity and such an expansive network of people. And what I was just thinking was a few things. One, when you said, you know, the passion that you built based on early times, watching your father draw, etc. And I think about how Martin and I decided to explore our artistic interest. And I was more of a singer-songwriter, but my mom woke us up every morning, every day, leaving us a note, hand-drawn on our pillows, which was amazing. She worked at night. We didn't get to see her all the time. And we would wake up to this note and this drawing. And, you know, I think back now, and I loved painting. I wasn't that great. I try things here and there, but to me, art kind of gave me an opportunity to share emotions that I didn't really talk about or share stories that I didn't really get to talk about. And I'm kind of curious what art meant to you or means to you today. Like, I know you're passionate about it. I know that there's waves here and there, and some days people get more passionate than the day before or the next day. And I was thinking about, you know, right now, how would you define the impact that art has had on your life, or how it's kind of motivated or moved your life?
That's a good question. I mean, it means everything. I would say, you know, it's like, I feel like it's just like this language that you could be anywhere, and it's like you can communicate with people like through your art. I've been fortunate to go to certain countries where I've met other artists. Made connections from one artist to another, and being able to meet, it's like you kind of speak this language, it's like, it's just something that you can communicate with so many people on different levels. And I think it goes for any type of art, you know what I mean? Like, I think music is very inspirational, very motivating. I think it could be anything from like, journalism and writing books and all types of stuff. I think there's always like some sort of inspiration that you can take from it. So I think everything has inspired me or motivated me one way or another, but it's always like a learning lesson sometimes. Like, some things you might like question certain things as far as like maybe like what happened with this opportunity or that opportunity, or but I think like it makes you a stronger, better person. Like, you keep going. And like I said, I don't want to sound redundant, but I think like things happen and opportunities pop up when you least expect it to sometimes. So I think like I have a really big appreciation, because like, me being, for example, having that studio at Pyramid Atlantic, when I applied and I got that studio, I had just finished at Maryland. I remember I was in Peru, and I had actually applied and submitted my portfolio for consideration, and I got the acceptance as far as like being able to have a studio there. And I was just like, man, like, it's just such a good feeling. And so, I think going from there, and then you just meet more and more people, and it's just like such a good thing.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about those two organizations, because we keep talking about them, but I know that I'm going to get lost in all these topics and in this conversation, because I'm enjoying it a lot, and I don't want to miss out. So tell me a little bit about Words, Beats, and Life, and then a little bit about Pyramid Atlantic Art Center, what they do, what you do there. Tell me how that got started, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So Words, Beats, and Life is a nonprofit art center. It's based in DC, and they do outreach to the youth and community through elements of hip hop. So, when I was in school, a counselor even recommended that organization to me, and I thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. But, I think I was kind of tied up with just like school, that I felt like I didn't have time for that. And then later down the line, I saw an opportunity as far as applying for an internship. And so I went, and fortunate enough to have an internship there. And so I met a lot of artists, and they teach classes as far as all the elements, like breaking, graffiti. They do poetry, they do beat making. So I thought it was like up my alley. Like, I love hip hop, and that's my thing. And so I've been there. I began as an intern, and then not long after, I actually started teaching a graffiti class. And then from there, but also like aside from the classes, we participate in events where it could be like fundraisers or just outreach, like where we'll do like drives in different parts of the city, like block parties, community cleanup, stuff like that. And we'll work with like schools in the area as well. And so I started off as an intern. I started teaching, and then after that, I became an academy manager. So I was kind of overseeing all the classes. So I was there at night after work from Trader Joe's. I would go to WBL, and I would be there throughout the week in the evenings. And then I also helped create a college course, like
nice.
We work with a lot of students that are in high school in 11th and 12th grade, and so they're getting ready to graduate. So some of these students have no clue as far as like financial aid and their options, as far as when they want to apply, what is it that they want to what these schools want to look into, like look for. So we would even help them build portfolios and take pictures and help them with documenting things that will really help them as far as applying for schools. So yeah, I've been there since, it's more right now, it's like freelance stuff. I'll create like digital designs and create like screens, like designs where I'll screen print for, different schools like Howard Community College. I've had the opportunity to paint at the Kennedy Center, I want to say 4 years in a row. And just again, this is one of those things where it's like being there, you get to, these doors open and you meet multiple people. I mean, people that I like either respected, I knew of, or didn't even know of. And, it's just like making these connections, and it's just like, it's been good ever since I've started there.
Well, I'll say this because, one, I appreciate the amount of organizations that have come up to do these type of things, and the people that support, volunteer, the staff, everyone at these organizations, because frankly, I was one of those individuals who didn't know that there was a deadline to apply to college or what you needed to do to apply to college. Zero idea. Frankly, because I was focused on other stuff, meaning just life situations where I had to help my family and other things that I wasn't even thinking about college.
Sure.
So I thankfully had a teacher when I was doing musical theater who said, no, Brian, what are you doing? Yeah. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And that's, this is how you need to do it. Which was extremely helpful for me. So I'm glad that there's organizations that do that, and talking about kind of meeting one person and then taking you to the next and expanding your networks, expanding your opportunities, which in turn expands your career. Here's someone who's working full time, going to school, right? And then working full time at Trader Joe's, and at night going to do these types of things, which created more opportunities, which I think sometimes it takes hard work, because let's just say you're at work full time and you want to go home and knock out, or maybe you want to work on your own pieces.
Sure. And it's kind of like, that's another thing. It's like, balancing everything, because it's kind of like a balancing act. I mean, everyone has like their thing, you could have a family, you could be trying to work 2-3 jobs and still trying to make that time, like as far as working on your craft. So I totally agree. I was going to Trader Joe's, but it's funny because at first I was going to school during the day, then going to Trader Joe's at night. Then I finished Maryland, I'm going to Trader Joe's during the day. And then I applied to the internship, and I'm going to WBL at night. Monday through Friday, or it was like Monday through Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m. because those were the times that the classes were going on. So the kids that were coming out of school would come to the church. It's at St. Stephen's Church. It's right there on Newton and 16th Street. And so, that's when the classes were going on, 6 to 9 p.m. And then sometimes there were events going on in the weekend and stuff like that. So I think, trying to figure that out as far as like schedule, and some days can feel longer than others, but I think it was worth it.
So tell me about Pyramid
Atlantic. So going back to when they were located in Silver Spring, I'll never forget, one person had reached out to me through a mutual friend and asked me if I wanted to come by and check out the art center. And she said, just bring a photo and bring a t-shirt. And I was like, okay, like, sure. So I met her, I brought my photo, and I brought a digital file, and I brought a t-shirt, and she kind of like opened me up as far as exposing me to like printmaking. And she showed me how to screen print a t-shirt, and I was like, damn, like that's cool. And then not long after, I met a friend who actually had a residency. He was staying in town. He was from Madison, Wisconsin, I think. And he had a residency with Pyramid. And so basically, I think he was with Pyramid for about 3 months or so. And he was just producing a body of work, a screen print. And it was multiple layers. And I watched him when he invited me, and I watched him print. I want to say one print, but it had maybe like 4 or 5 layers on it. And it was like crisp and clean, and like it was like black and gray with some gold in there. And I thought it was so cool because he screen printed like a mock-up of like a comic book cover. And so ever since then, I had a real big appreciation for Pyramid Atlantic. And even when I was at Maryland, they kind of reached out to Maryland, the printmaking studio students, as far as like when they hosted printmaking events, like they would invite us and we would go to these like printmaking symposiums. And so you would see all these techniques from some of the resident artists there. And so when I fast forward, when I finished Maryland, I saw that they were moving from Silver Spring to Hyattsville. And, you know, I figured like, I have nothing to lose. Like, let me go ahead and apply, you know, and let me submit my portfolio. And I think I needed like a cover letter and also come up with like an essay of like, how do I see myself fitting into this community, into like this art center? And so I think it's 19 studios there. And so I submitted the work. They reached out after like reviewing it and allowed me or gave me space there. And so, yeah, I've been at Pyramid Atlantic for, I want to say about 4 years. Nice. In the Hyattsville Arts District. And they're awesome. I mean, I would recommend, you know, checking it out because, you know, on the first floor, there's like the front desk, there's also like our store. So you can find like all the merchandise and everything there. But we have like open studios where you can watch people or even take workshops as far as like learning how to letterpress, how to do lithography, how to screen print, how to even make paper. And, you know, it's really cool because on the there's 3 floors. My studio's on the 3rd floor. On the 2nd floor, there's also a design firm on the 2nd floor, as well as a gallery space and a couple of studios. So every now and then they host shows from different artists. And, you know, being there is like super inspiring, and it's always good. And, you know, it's nice because I have 24-hour access to my studio. So
that is nice.
Yeah. When I first got my studio, I was there random times at like 1 a.m. or something like that. And I've even like worked for hours where I was so tired, I ended up just crashing on my couch in the studio. You know, so Pyramid is really good. It's a good place as far as like, you know, if anyone's interested in just learning and taking a look at some skills when it comes to printmaking, because they cover different fields. And also they still do those in-house like residencies where people can apply and come. Some people come from different places. One person came from Philly. I think another person came from like New York, but, you know, they reached, it's like international, you know, so it's really cool to see people that come in and also create in a period of time.
Well, I'll say this because I think it's extremely important, and I've experienced this in my own life. So you never know when an opportunity is actually going to pan out. And sometimes it just takes you taking a chance or taking a risk and saying, why not? To give that opportunity a chance. Look, I've had things where, frankly, I've just asked the question or submitted something or received opportunities that if I really sat down and thought about for a second, I would have been like, no, I'm competing against people that are way more talented or probably more qualified or whatever reason, and I wouldn't have submitted. Totally. And sometimes that stops us.
Definitely. I mean, I'm with you as far as like, I mean, you can be your worst critic, I think, sometimes. And you can, it's like, how do I say it? Like pre-buyer's remorse. You can talk yourself out of like buying something. It's like, you can talk yourself out of applying to something or submitting something. And so I think that, you know, to be honest, sometimes I owe it to like family, friends, my wife, like just as far as words of encouragement or just like, you know, pushing through. And like I said, sometimes it's like, you gotta remind yourself, like, you got nothing to lose. Like, you know, it's worth applying. I've had multiple times where I've applied to calls for artists for murals, for just shows, stuff like that. And, you know, it just doesn't work out, and that's okay. It's just a matter of like, keep going. Because if you get stuck on one thing, you don't want to drown yourself with like this feeling that like you can't keep going with, like you can't produce, you can't submit stuff. Like, there's always going to be opportunities. It's just a matter of like how it comes up. And if you can, I don't want to say take advantage. I think like if the opportunity comes up, just, go for it and see what happens. Right. Yeah.
Well, when we're talking about different kinds of opportunity, I'm kind of curious. Do you focus on working on your own work, or do you take commission work? I'm looking at the shirt that you're wearing, and frankly, in my mind, I've wanted to ask you for the last 20 or so minutes. Is that something that you've made or printed out for yourself? And well, do you take any opportunity that comes your way? Like if someone says, "Hey, I want to be able to have you work on this," will you just do that, or do you try to focus on creating your own product? If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I think it depends, because one thing I learned over time is like, again, like balancing and time management and valuing your time, understanding like, and also being realistic, because sometimes you can put yourself in a position where you think like, oh, I can knock this out in like 2 days, and it might take like 4 or 5 days. And you're just like, damn, like, okay, I was way off on that. So I think I like to produce my own stuff. But of course, when it comes to opportunities as far as like, creating work with a purpose for like an event or like an organization or a small business or a local business, I think it just depends on, honestly, what the content is, and also like maybe the artistic freedom, if like you're looking to contribute in a certain way. Because sometimes people will ask you, I'll be honest, sometimes some things can be kind of cookie cutter, but also I think it's also, I've noticed a lot of times it's like when I'm asked as far as an opportunity, if I can create the work and submit it like the next day, and to me, it doesn't work like that. I feel like it's like when someone reaches out, one or two of my questions is, well, when's your deadline? When do you need it? And that kind of plays apart, because you can kind of see, as far as based on your time, can you really like create this stuff?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I mean, to me, what that made me think about is like, I've met a lot of small businesses where they feel that way about, let's say, logos, where it's, can I have a logo? I want it to be trendy. I want it to be this. I want it to be that, but I want it in like 2 hours,
Yeah.
And I've seen that pretty often. And I've had to think about it for myself, right? Where that made me think about the different websites that are out there now where you can find work for yourself through commission work or freelance work. And I was curious to know, do you use those websites now?
No, I think like, I think back when I first started actually like working on stuff, I saw those as options too. Like, oh, I can apply to this or apply to this site, like Fiverr, for example. Like, I remember like someone brought it up to me, and I was like, sure, I can create work for $5. That's what Fiverr was. I don't know if it's still around.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay. And so, but then you kind of see like the return, like what you get, what you're giving and what you're getting. And so, I respect everyone as far as like working on their stuff and practicing and building on those skills. But I felt like, it wasn't worth it. And, kind of going back to like what you were saying, like some businesses might ask for a logo and they expect it in 2 hours. That's the real thing. And like, I'm not trying to hate or anything. And I don't want to come off like an asshole, but I'm sure sometimes that thought process, it could be seen as that. But yeah, I mean, even today I was asked about, if I can create a shirt, and like, how long would it take? Can I get it like in a couple of days? I've been asked about like creating stuff, but I've learned, as far as what works best for me is asking, aside from like kind of figuring out like budgets and all that stuff. It's like the time, like when did you need this by? Because sometimes people need it ASAP, but sometimes myself or any other artist might not have that availability.
Yeah, so I'm going to transition to this because you mentioned something earlier that's been stuck in my mind as well, which is you talked about art with a purpose and that you would like to work on art with purpose, based on purpose. Not that you would reject any other kind of work, but I know that you believe this based on other interactions that we've had. But I know that you have a strong feeling that artists have a valuable tool that we can use to communicate on different levels. And I was talking to Marlon about this and how other artists have been known to be influenced or to influence the climate of society that they live in or when they live in. And we were talking like Picasso, and Marta mentioned it. It was the 1937 Guernica, and I'm probably going to get murdered because I probably said that absolutely wrong. And Banksy and his famous street art. And I know that you've mentioned communication through your work and through your art. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on how artists should use their art. Should we be involved in the political forum? And I've seen some of the stuff that you've done lately. And I was wanting to know if you like to work on things that promote a message or provide your own message. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
One quick thing, going back real quick. Also, like as far as like people reaching out and like wondering if it's like asking about the content. For the most part, I haven't really run across like people that have like thrown out some bogus thing that like that I'm like
doesn't work,
taken back by. But that can happen. As far as your art, I think it's and I've learned this, like I didn't understand it or really realize it in the beginning, but like after seeing and studying artists and looking at their work and trying to understand what it is that they're trying to give to the audience, like what I would take a class. I took a class where it was like analyzing every single day. Every class we would study a specific piece of art and just break it down from like the type of medium they use, the type of colors they use, the type of emotions you see on these people's faces. What is it that they're trying to talk about? And this kind of reminds me of like, one artist, Mark Rothko, and I'll never forget, like, it's very minimal, but it's very like interesting work. And I just didn't understand it at first. But it, you kind of like educate yourself, you read up on stuff, you go to these museums, and you build this understanding that every single artist is creating something with a purpose, I would say. Some can be more loose than others when I say that, as far as like the train of thought. But even the technique can be more loose than others. You know what I mean? Like as far as like abstract expressionism and stuff like that. But I do think that all the work that everyone is creating, it's communicating to everyone in a different way. Like I think like sometimes the more abstract work, as far as like the stuff that isn't related to like lettering, is more open to interpretation. It's not as doesn't have as much structure when it comes to like just letters and straightforward stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think it is important to like use that in a way that you can kind of express yourself. And I don't think like everyone needs to create work specifically for like politics or anything like that.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? But I think like I just learned that like there's certain things you can make that draws people in, and it's a tool that like seeing other friends create stuff too, that's just like enlightening, refreshing. Sometimes it's kind of like questioning things, but sometimes things need to be addressed and brought up, depending on like what's going on in the world and things that are going on every day that we're surrounded with. But like I think myself, just yourself as a musician, for example, you know, like that you're speaking, you're saying these words, like there's meaning to it. So like, you know, I listen to music and that inspires me or puts me in a certain mood, or I'm in a certain mood and I need something that kind of like pushes that more, you know? So,
You know, that just made me think of, you know, I've worked on music where I was working on music with somebody for somebody, and they said, you know, Brian, we want to write this type of song with this type of meaning. And that's not always my favorite way to do it. It's more like I want it to feel a
you
certain
want it to
way.
be,
Yeah,
or you want it to be more organic.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we've had moments where it was like, hey, someone's asking for a song because um, you know, I was trying to write behind the scenes with just to give a little bit of context. And sometimes it's just like, I was going to put it out there. And it's funny because we've written songs where we've provided a product where we were frankly just joking around, didn't really always feel
Yeah.
it. And they loved it, you know, oh, that sounds great. And there was times where, you know, I wasn't really down with the idea, but I wanted something to work on. And sometimes the message or the purpose or what it turned into, the feeling behind it impacted me personally. And I say this, the reason I bring this up is because I've seen a lot of the murals that you've done and that you've posted. And we'll talk about where you post all those pieces and everything. Um, but have you been a part of a product where at the end of the day, you're like, wow, this piece has impacted me?
Yeah. I think that, you know, I think from the first mural I painted, um, I think that really kind of set in as far as like, you know, I can create something on a large scale and all walks of life, different types of
Yeah.
people are drawn to it. And it's just like, you know, hearing feedback, hearing what people have to say, you know, it's like I try to acknowledge and appreciate and have an understanding. And it really like, um, it kind of is just something that's very meaningful,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, I started to realize like, damn, like, you know, you're creating this public work of art and it's going to be reaching certain people in different ways in different communities, you know. And I did one mural in the Kenilworth Recreation Center that opened 2 years ago. And when I walked into that recreation center, I saw murals from other artists that I recognized, but also I didn't recognize and I got to meet. And I painted a mural in their brand new kitchen class. So there was like multiple tables, but ovens and refrigerators and stuff like that. And so I painted like produce and stuff like that on the walls. And it was just kind of fun and whimsical. Um, but, you know, like I painted that and like, you know, kids are coming in and, you know, they'll be seeing that on a daily basis. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, I remember I participated in an event which some people I'm sure are familiar with, Broccoli City Festival.
Yeah.
And so it was cool because I was given 3 panels and those were, I don't remember the dimensions. It might've been like 10 feet by 10 feet, but you know, I painted one wall that was more for like Broccoli City Festival, and then another one that said love yourself, and another one that said defend the dreamers. And it was like, you know, I've I had people come up to me while I was painting or while I was done,
Mm.
and you know they were taking pictures next to that or the other piece. But you know, like the dreamers one, you know, I was approached by someone who said, you know, I'm a dreamer and I really appreciate you doing this,
Wow.
and this has a lot of meaning to it. And so it's like those moments where like you kind of take that in and you know it's motivating and you just kind of remind yourself about those things like when you're creating more work. And so, you know, just recently I did, and it was unexpected, but also I was like really grateful for the opportunity to paint downtown in Chinatown
Yeah.
because, you know, obviously there's a lot going on down as far as like demonstrations and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And so there's been a lot of artists that have been painting like the storefronts and,
Yeah.
you know, bringing about like attention to what's going on and but also kind of like inspiring pieces, you know, that are just in I don't want there. It's just kind of like bringing life into the area, because
Yeah,
I
and I'll say
walked
this
down.
because I drove down to DuPont because I have an office down in that area, and I was going
Okay.
down the street, and I saw all the boarded up storefronts, which was really a powerful
Yeah.
thing to see. And then I didn't get a chance to do this, but I wanted to go down to Chinatown down by 7th Street because I know a lot of people were
Oh,
working
cool.
around Jose Andreas. And you know how he has those 3 different spots right there down
Yeah,
7th
yeah, yeah.
Street. So I wanted to go see it because I heard that people, instead of boarding up some of the storefronts, were using art and having people paint and draw on the
Yeah, I
storefronts to.
thought. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is that just seeing the difference of kind of some of the sections I saw where there was art up on the storefronts or on the plywood that was up there was how do you call it? I don't want to say the wrong thing, but
Sure, sure.
a beautiful reminder of the beauty behind what was happening in that moment, if that makes sense. People uniting and spreading a message and working together.
That's, I think, a great way to put it, because I had I think what's been going on currently with like the pandemic and all that stuff, like I took time off even from work because I just was trying to stay safe, and
Yeah.
my wife is a high risk, and it's like this opportunity came up that was unexpected, and she was open to me going down there, and
Yeah.
obviously being aware and trying to be safe. But when I went down there, I haven't seen Chinatown like that
Nah.
ever, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I went down and it was like 2 or 3 blocks just like boarded up. I'm like, what is going on?
Intense, right?
And yeah, like my friends, it was really cool to see them. They painted the front of Jose Andres's restaurant.
Oh, cool.
And so when I saw them doing their thing, I was like, damn, that's what's up. Like, and I wasn't surprised, like, I to see them doing that, and seeing them paint.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when I went there, and just like you said, like unity, and like bringing all these artists together, and like kind of creating a really nice environment. Us along the road, along 7th Street, that was all boarded up. It's like different, because it's like it makes a difference to add that color to it. Those designs, the work from all these artists, and there was a lot of different artists out there, and it was cool to see, and so yeah, it was nice to be a part of that.
Yeah, so I mean, like, with everything going on right now, with the pandemic, with the demonstrations, what are you up to right now? How are you doing? How are you holding up? How are you managing?
So I had taken off about 2 months from work, as far as like being in the store, but I've gone back since, and
Nice.
Not working full time, but
Yeah.
it's this is an example, I guess, where certain opportunities have come up, where I'm still submitting work for and like proposals for different opportunities, as far as murals or designs that have been requested for use. And I just finished painting a facade of like a friend's new store that's opening up in Brentwood,
Cool.
which is right down from Hyattsville. Excuse me, it's like right down from Pyramid Atlantic, but yeah, in that area, Hyattsville area. And that came up, which I'm grateful for, and just different opportunities of creating designs and like working on like a t-shirt design for an event, for Words Beats in Life, for example, or different courses, because they're even creating like different classes, but like at a university level. So I think it could be jumping ahead, but I think like they might be having these courses at like American University. So like it was fun to kind of create these logos, these graphics for use. So, once it was difficult for me to take the time off in the sense of like you're used to like a routine, but it wasn't difficult understanding that like my wife is a high risk, you know. It's you got to play it safe. But when I was home, I kind of had an idea of already things that I need to work on. And so I just was occupied with that. And I've been going back to the studio a little bit more. Like I was just there maybe twice this week. But for a period of time, I kind of just was low key and just working from home.
You know, that reminds me, because Martin and I were talking about how people spend their time, but also making sure that you value your time. And the question was, you know, how do you price your time or your work? Is it something where you get these murals, these screen printing jobs, and you say, I'm going to spend about this much time on something, so I'm going to charge X per hour, or a flat fee for the whole project? Or do you have an hourly rate? I'm curious to know, you know, to hear what your strategy is and how you approach this.
And again, this is like another thing that like I learned. There wasn't like a manual or anything that I kind of like read through and that was it. Because everyone that you work with is going to be coming with different ideas or budgets and time. And that's the thing. It's kind of like I learned, obviously, like asking, you know, when do you need this by? Or what's your budget? You know, because everything is different. That's that as far as projects go, because it could be something small scale or large scale, and I think you kind of go on like individual basis. Like every single project, you treat it as its own thing, because it could be a wall that's like 20 feet or 10 feet or 5 feet. But, you know, I know you can try charging by square footage, but sometimes it might be like over the top. And so really, I think it's just like, you got to ask yourself how much, basically, what are you creating? Like, is it in depth? How much color are you applying? How much are the materials that you're going to be using? How many days are you going to be working on it? And then also, you know, value that time. And also, once you come up with a number, you can present that. But also it depends. Like if they meet you with a number initially, is that worth your time? Like it's like if you ask someone, what's your budget? And they give you a number, are you comfortable working with it? What justifies like you being comfortable with working with that price? So again, I think it's just like, it depends on the opportunity and what's it for, when do they need it by. That's how I treat it. And I learned that because I felt like, you know, I would scratch my head in the beginning, like, you know, and it doesn't even have to relate to a mural. It could be like a commissioned piece or a logo design or any type of design. Like, think about like, how long is it going to take you to brainstorm on something? How many sketches are you going to run through? How long is that going to take you? Is that something like up your field, like that you can bust out like super fast, or you need to do some research? Because some of those things, I think it's good to kind of like do your homework in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's extremely important. I shot wedding photography because I'm just one of these guys who likes to touch a little bit of everything. So I like, you know, music, paint, art, all these different types of mediums. It's just a part of who I am. So, you know, I tried photography and did a few things, and it was all really cool. But, you know, someone asked me to shoot a wedding, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I went to dig into it because my instinct was like, you know, it's just going to take a few hours, to just charge for a few hours and call it a day. But, you know, I had to think about, you know, all the time that we had to spend on setup calls, all the materials, the equipment, and frankly, the memory systems and editing. Yeah, the editing is insane. It takes a ton of hours, and then there's the response and the conversation back and forth regarding editing. You know, not changing a pimple on 100 pictures.
I've at one point, even like before Trader Joe's, I worked as an assistant for a photographer. So
cool.
I love photography. I mean, I appreciate it, and so I mean, I've done like a wedding here and there, and like you kind of get that feedback or like touch ups like in Photoshop, or head swaps and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's a process. And so I think and that's a good thing that you brought up, like when you're working with people, I think it's a good thing to like keep in mind, like, working with a client, like, there's always, going to be, I feel like there can be some feedback, one way or another, positive, or maybe like a change that might be requested. I think it's also good to be mindful, like, constructive criticism, like, feedback, like how, if someone doesn't like it, hopefully they tell you why they don't like it, or what can I do to make this better? Like being on that on that level of communication with the client, and have that understanding, so both sides are happy with the outcome. So yeah, Agreed. I've had moments where, that I have to make adjustments and changes, but it's all good, because it's like, at the end of the day, I would love for the client to be happy, and I would love to be happy with the work that I create, as long as there's that understanding and communication.
Yeah. So. And I think when we're talking about working with clients, communication is extremely important. Going back to the wedding thing, it was making sure, for example, that the bride and the groom knew exactly what we were walking into. Like, there was one couple who didn't like that in some of the pictures. There was people holding up their cell phones in the reception or whatever it was. So in the next one, I had to think about that. And I spoke to the bride and the groom and said, if you don't want something like that, we want to go ahead and say something. So they went ahead and told people, hey, please don't take pictures during the ceremony, reception, whatever it was, because we have a photographer and would rather not. So had to learn from that experience. And really it comes down to learning from each time you do something, the conversations and what you're going to be able to say, and how do you take what I've learned from the previous client and apply it to the new one or the new project, so that the communication and the expectations are all clear. And I think, you have to also think about, what do you need to talk about? What do you need to buy? What kind of things do you want in there? I'm always kind of nervous to ask someone to do something for me, because I'm also someone who likes to give a lot of input when I work on something. So I try to stay away from that. When I hire someone, I have to say, hey, it's all yours, because if not, I'm going to be super picky, because I'm the kind of person who likes, straight lines. When you vacuum, kind of a weird thing of mine, but I've learned for myself that it's
it's kind of like cutting the grass. You see these like in like ballparks and stuff. They're like diamonds and stuff like that. Yeah. No, I gotcha.
So what I was going to say is, I think that you learn over time, and you learn from experience and from others, what questions to ask, how you're going to set it up so that people know what they're walking into. Again, totally. And I know when I was editing, being able to say, I'm not going to edit beyond a certain point. I'm not going to edit the 100 pimples or whatever it was. But so here's what's going to happen. Here's how we're going to do it, so that they knew exactly how that was going to work.
I totally agree with that. I think it's like, you kind of set these, like, I think boundaries is too harsh. I think just like being able to right. talk about it and know the expectations, and just being able to have that understanding. And also, like, when it comes to like budgets and pricing and stuff like that, it's not always gonna to work out.
Right.
But I wouldn't be discouraged, because, I think like it happens, and like, and sometimes not every single thing, kind of like how I was saying, like, submitting things and it fell through, it didn't get accepted. It's just like, you kind of you keep going at a certain point, things will just come together.
Yeah. And listen, John, I'm having a lot of fun talking to you right now. And I think I'm going to continue to get lost in all these topics and questions that I have for you. But I definitely want to ask you what you would do differently today, knowing what you know now. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, what would you tell someone starting their career today as an artist at this point in your career, from everything that you've learned over time? Like, what would you want someone to hear from you?
I would say,
and it's kind of a loaded question.
There's a couple of things. I think, like, value your time, your work.
Yeah.
Like, your work is powerful one way or another. And I think um, work hard and understand that like sometimes it's like I think I mentioned before, things fluctuate. It's not always easy. Things aren't going to come to you. You kind of got to like work hard towards it. And
For
like,
sure.
You know, these doors open and sometimes it's like, you can see it or you might not, and you just meet other people. Just, I would say also be open.
Oh yeah.
You know, like going to like this when I was in school and like getting pushed out of my comfort zone, I think like just be open to different things. Have it be like meeting other people, other artists, mentors, you know, critiques, like feedback. I think that was one of the things also, just being open to like feedback and just like, but also like constructive, like how you can make it better and just keep working, like just, you know, work hard and, you know, it's not always easy. I was thinking about this interview and, you know, it's like a balance. Like I'll never forget, someone showed me like, and, you know, it was like a Venn diagram. And it's like on one side, it's like critical self-doubt. And then the other one's like absolute narcissism. And in the middle, it says art, you know what I mean? And it's just like, there's a lot of like feelings and emotions when it comes to working and creating like this path for yourself. And granted, I'm not saying like, that was like me, like as far as like those two things, but you know, you do have these speed bumps where you just like kind of question stuff, and it could be like for a split second, it could be for a certain length of time, but keep going, keep working, keep creating, even if it's like work that you're creating and you're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Like I'll tell you, like sometimes I've gone to the studio and I've sat there and I've worked on just like brush strokes or random like just like line density, like thin and thin lines, and seeing how it plays off. And you know, it's, to me it's nothing, but then I've done stuff where someone has seen it and said like, oh my god, that shit's really cool, and I'm like, damn, like thank you. But like,
you know, the craziest thing though, sometimes it's the things that you least expected that make the biggest impact, and it blows my mind.
I feel like it just totally. Oh, not always, but like totally, I can relate to that.
Oh, and I'm so sorry I cut you off. What were you gonna say?
No, I think like it's just keep going, keep working hard, and like being able to adapt to different things and being open is key, and just value the time. Of course, like there's always, you gotta kind of like sometimes there's nothing in return, you know, and I think that was how it was for me at certain times. And even now, like there's certain things like it's more for like the purpose, like the meaning behind it, and sometimes it's valuable in itself, like the meaning behind something. But you know, it's like cherish your work and value the time.
You know, talking about cherishing your work and valuing your time, I'm thinking about when I was messing around with music. Some of the things that came were very positive, but there was also a lot of judgment and things that I wasn't expecting. Like I was working on a song with an artist in a Latin American country, and I sang it the way that I normally would, and the response was like, "Hey, that's way too R&B-ish," and some of the things that came out of those conversations kind of blew my mind. But there was a lot of criticism, a lot of judgments about things that I didn't really expect. It was kind of like, what are you talking about? You should do it your own way. And sometimes it bothered me. And let's say you're working at something at Trader Joe's or one of the murals. I'm kind of curious how you deal with that. Do you get people that come and criticize and say, hey, you should have tweaked it this way. You should have done this. You should have done that. How do you deal with the negative feedback? Like what's your approach?
Yeah. I think it's pretty it's common, I think, like as far as like that feedback, and like you know, my cousin will probably kill me if he heard me say this, but a lot of times, sometimes he'll like see something that I've done and he'll like message me like, well, why'd you have to go so thick on that letter? Or why didn't you do it with this color scheme? Right. I'm like, I'll give them like attitude and
why don't you do
tell
it?
them, well, this is the way I felt like it was going to be good. If you want it that way, then maybe you should create it yourself,
Right.
Like my cousin, I'll just mess with him and stuff. But yeah, I think like, I think getting that feedback, it's just like, well, I think I've had moments where I'll submit something as far as like a design or a logo, and I'll get something where like, oh, well, I expected it to be this way, or I was expecting more of like softer colors, or I was expecting like the letters to play this way as opposed to the way you have it. And I think sometimes I might disagree. I'll disagree because in my head, I'm just like thinking like, well, to me, this looks right. But I think I've had moments where I'll communicate that like, well, the reason why I went this way is because da 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 da, and I thought that was going to kind of bring out that message more. And it doesn't hurt to say stuff like that.
No.
But if they kind of want it a certain way, you kind of want to get that understanding out the way. And like, yeah, I think like having that criticism, it's just best to kind of like understand where they're coming from. But there's people who don't have that artistic direction, and so they'll just say shit that like you're wondering like, why would you even like, what, that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
So it's like kind of like working with them in the sense of like leveling and like trying to tell them like, hey, I mean, maybe it can be like this, or maybe it can be like that. And yeah, you just kind of got to make some time for that too, because sometimes that does happen. Like, going back to like quotes and stuff like that. Like, you can once like, you might be working on a project, and they've given you like a deposit up front, or like half a deposit, to commit. You're committing to that work, and it's kind of like a contract. It's like you're not always going to get it on the first try. In my personal experience, as far as like creating a design or a concept for someone, and you hand it over, it's kind of like you got to go back to the drawing board, and you also have to understand like, I can't sit here for a month and sketch like a million drawings until it's the one. Like, we got to kind of like navigate.
Do you use contracts?
It all depends. I mean, I think like, you got to think about like 1099s and all that stuff when you're doing freelance work, and depending on like, who you're working with, where they're coming from. But it's like upfront, I usually prefer to have a deposit up front.
For sure.
But sometimes there's always like, there can be like grants and stuff like that where they're not going to be right away. Like, but you're kind of like signed into something, and there's that understanding that like once the job's complete, sometimes there's like a net 30 where like you'll submit an invoice once the job's complete, and you'll be able to get that funds within 30 days. It's just different scenarios. Like, every single job can be different, but I think being able to secure some funding up front is also a way of like that, you're committing to it, and that this is like a real opportunity. And so this isn't like you create something, you submit it, and then boom, like someone disappears and like get anything in return. So like you gotta be mindful of that. So.
Yeah, and I've taken up a ton of your time, but I wanted to make sure I gave another opportunity to see if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't already talked about, and that you think would be helpful to everyone listening.
I mean, I feel like we kind of like touched on just about everything when it came to like, as far as like art and my career and how things are. And yeah, I think like just like for me, like how everything came full circle, but I'm also still kind of like, I feel like it's like this puzzle that you're kind of still, you piece together. Yeah, I think it's just like the experiences and like being able to meet people. It's just been a great for me, and all the opportunities. And I think that I've learned just to be open and, you know, use those tools to communicate. It's important. So, yeah, I think we covered a good amount of stuff.
That's great. And well, I'll add this because I want to reinforce what you said a little bit more. I think it's important to enjoy the experiences that you have and to make sure that you don't undervalue those moments, those lessons, and the people that you get to connect with and meet along the way. And John, you and I met through a mutual friend, a family member. I didn't think that we would end up here today having this conversation right now, but I think it's something where you never know where life takes you. You never know who you're going to meet, what lessons you're going to learn, how you're going to be able to implement those lessons. And again, I think it's extremely important to value those experiences. And I'll say this because I want to thank you so much for joining us, for being with us today, for taking your time to talk through some of the topics that we got to talk about. And I really mean this genuinely. I don't want to sound cheesy or like I'm pushing anything, but dude, I think that you're extremely talented. I appreciate what you've been doing. I appreciate everything that you've put out and the work that you've done to support a lot of the movements that I've seen you work on and the nonprofit organizations that we talked about that you continue to work with. And I think those things are extremely important. And I remember growing up and seeing murals throughout my neighborhoods, and I wouldn't want someone like yourself to forget that you are making an impact, that you are helping people build memories, and you're going to be a part of those experiences for them. So thank you, and I appreciate your time again. And I just want to make sure that we tell people where they can learn more about you, how they can find out more about you. So
thank you, and Marlon too, just for the opportunity, because I really appreciate it. And thank you for the compliments, everything. I'm super grateful, and yeah, happy to be here talking with you. As far as my work goes, the easiest way to find the work that I'm sharing is on my Instagram, and that's at jgraphics.studios. It's at jgrafx.studios, studios, and that's where you can find, most of the work is just usually shared on that page.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to make sure that I add everything on the blog post, on the description. So if you're listening, check out the blog, the description, etc. And you'll see links to John's work, but also the organizations that he's worked with. And a quick thank you to everyone listening. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I hope that you learned from this experience and that you take a moment to check out John's work and the organizations, and that you can tune in for the next show. Thank you so much, and look forward to connecting with you again.